The following broadcast is brought to you by the iGolf Sports Network.
Golf Talk Live is sponsored by the iGolf Sports Network and Golf Tips Magazine. Here's Andrew to tell you more about our sponsors.
iGolf Sports is a live stream broadcast and media production company providing quality programming designed to attract the golfing enthusiast. And Golf Tips, the game's most in-depth instruction magazine, including reviews on the latest equipment, tips from top teaching professionals, all designed to help you improve from tee to green. Welcome to Golf Talk Live with your host, Ted Odorico. Join Ted each week as he speaks with some of the best in golf. This week's special guest will join us a bit later. But first up is another great discussion on Coach's Corner. So let's introduce tonight's Coach's Corner panel.
All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Season 13 of Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Ted Odorico. We've got a great show for you this evening. Joining me here in just a moment on Coach's Corner panel tonight is my good friend, Jim Endicott. Just to remind everybody, of course, if you want to go to see all of the episodes, if you go to the YouTube channel at youtube.com/at iGolf Sports is where you can find it, or you can also catch it on Spotify.com. Just under Golf Talk Live, just search it there. But if you go to the YouTube channel, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel and get notifications of when the new episodes are uploaded every week, so you can check them out there. And lots of good stuff there already, so make sure you go and do that. Now, let me tell you about my first guest here joining me on the Coach's Corner panel. He's been on many times, but I'll tell you a little bit about him anyways. He's currently a PGA education faculty member and a PGA specialized professional in both teaching and coaching. He's a former Golf Digest School's general manager and a 7-time PGA Award winner, including the 2022 North Florida PGA Section Patriot Award and 2 North Florida PGA Youth Development Awards as well. He's also a Golf Tips Magazine Top 25 instructor and a senior contributor to the magazine as well. So, Jim, welcome back again to Coach's Corner here on Golf Talk Live.
Well, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me again.
Not a problem. Always happy to have you, and I appreciate all that you bring in. So, because it's just going to be you and I tonight, I had somebody else scheduled, but unfortunately there came up a conflict. So I thought this would be a good opportunity for you and I to be able to zero in on a topic I know that you're very passionate about. I know you love golf in general, but I think this one will hit right home. So we're going to talk about junior golf. We're going to talk about some of the steps to a successful journey as a junior golfer. And we're going to start right from the beginning. And I just want to just mention this before we start. Is I'm going to zero on some specific things. So don't jump ahead if you don't mind, because I have some follow-up questions I'm going to have. So I know it's very easy sometimes to make sure you're covering everything, but I just want to set that up because there's some specific things I want to get you to dial in on. So I guess the first thing is what's the initial step, I guess, for somebody that wants to be a junior golfer? So obviously we're talking, before collegiate golf, we're talking maybe at a very young age. They've maybe been out with dad or even mom out to the driving range. They play a little bit of golf, and they want to get into some of the junior programs that might be available to them. They've decided, hey, this might be something I'm interested in doing. So as an instructor / coach, what's some of the initial steps that you're going to do to really see where they sort of fit in the mold? So what are you going to do? Is it going to start with an assessment, or how are you going to sort of begin the conversation?
Well, I think it begins first and foremost. I get the question all the time, when should I start my player in golf? And the response to that is when they show an interest, when they have a keen interest in wanting to come out and do it. Like you said, most will come out with a parent and get engaged in the game that way. And from me as a coach, once they've come, I want to get an understanding of the child. What's their attention span? What's their interest level? What do they have as physical capabilities? And through that, and the way we go about that assessment is not just golf activities.
Mhm.
And sometimes that runs contrary to what parents see and want and believe that they should be doing.
Right.
But we want to see what they're able to do. Fundamental movement actions. Can they throw a ball? Can they catch a ball? Can they kick a ball? Can they skip? All those sorts of things. And in fact, at a very young age, let's call it, say, between 3 and 6 or 7 years old,
Mm.
the primary function in the learning atmosphere is just that. It's fundamental movement skills and getting them to do different things and being aware of their body. And then we transfer and translate that into golf activities.
Right.
So being able to throw a ball gets the feeling of their body doing this sort of a thing, which certainly incorporates into the action of the golf swing being to rotate and that sort of thing. Being able to bend down and catch a ball that maybe is too low.
Mm.
That gets them the under awareness of how their body does this sort of a thing. So at a very young age, they have to have an interest. And then we're going to generate that interest even more by fun activities, fundamental movement skills, and let's call it dribble in a little bit of golf.
Yeah, because you don't want to get into. I mean, obviously at that age, their hand-eye coordination is not really very developed yet, and hence why you want to see how they're catching a ball, how they're interacting with different situations. But once you've sort of established, okay, this is something that they've expressed an interest, they want to do. Obviously, you want to have a conversation with both them and at some point with the parents as well. So, I guess really to sort of ensure a good start. What should the player and parents consider in these early stages? So what should the parents be thinking about at this point? Not necessarily at 3 years old, but let's say we'll move them up around 7, 8, maybe even 9 years old, where they're saying, okay, I'm really interested in playing golf. I've got some friends that play golf. I go out and play with dad quite a bit, or both parents, what have you. And I really want to get into some sort of junior programs. So what's that conversation initially going to be like with the parents and obviously the player as well?
Well, I would want to understand what's their time availability. Are they engaged in other activities, other sports? At that age, 7 to 12, let's call it, we're getting involved in Little League Baseball. We're getting involved in soccer. We're getting involved in other activities. What type of time frame can they give to this or want to give to this? And once we understand and establish that, we can establish a program that we can do. And I would encourage them to understand that they're going to do golf for a season, and they're going to do baseball for a season, or whatever other activity that might be, if they're interested in basketball or they're interested in hockey or whatever the case may be.
Right.
But to be rounded in multiple activities. And then what we have to do with that parent is establish, here's our timeline in the year. Here's the time it's going to be dedicated to golf. And here's the time it's going to be dedicated to other things. All too often we see the parent pushing and pushing and pushing. I've had them come to me at 7, 8 years old of age, and the parent has grand ideas that they're going to go play college golf at Stanford.
Right.
And so we're going to put an agenda together to do that. But you know what? That child is now, they're really more about having some fun. They're about chipping and competing with coach. And if he beats coach, he gets to run over here. And I've got some cones with different prizes under it, and he gets to pull the prize.
Yeah.
Even at 12 years old, that is as much of the intrigue of playing golf as hitting a golf ball. And so we have to make sure that the parent understands that being well-rounded in different activities, golf, other sporting activities, the arts, whatever it might be, other activities, not just focused in one over that time frame to get them to college golf. And we have to kind of push them or put the player in a position to feel comfortable and free to say, this is what I want to do, not what dad or mom want me to do.
Yeah, because what often happens is if the junior golfer will say wants to spend more time in golf because that's really where their passion is, then they're going to lead you as the coach, and they're going to also say to mom and dad, say, I really want to spend more time on golf and maybe not as much over here. But I like what you're saying there is have them involved in multiple activities, because otherwise what happens is if they get pushed in one direction, and it doesn't matter, it doesn't even have to be golf, it could be something else, too much by outside influences, they tend to get burnt out and not enjoy the experience as much. And then suddenly what might have been a dream of theirs suddenly becomes a mini nightmare, because it's all about appealing to somebody else's, I hate to use the word selfishness, but essentially it's what happens with parents becoming overzealous and wanting their child to be the next, superstar on the PGA or the LPGA Tour. So I like what you're saying there. So once you've established, okay, the student now says, okay, Jim, I really want to start playing junior golf. I'm interested in, I don't know where it's going to go, but I have some aspirations from what I've seen, what I've talked about, what I've experienced. So what should you do as their coach if they've come up to you and say, okay, I want you to be my coach? What should you do, I guess, before working with a new junior golfer? So there's going to be things that you're going to do to sort of set the tone, if you will. So you're going to have maybe additional conversations. You're going to have other things that you're going to do. So walk us through that a little bit. What are some of the things you're going to do very early on in that process?
Well, once they've given me that commitment that golf is a focused direction,
Yep.
I would still encourage them to have other interests. But if we're going to have a genuine focus where that's the majority of our time, let's say not all of our time, but the majority of our time, now we're going to do a bit of an assessment more of what are their skills. How do they learn versus how do they have fun? That 7 to 12, 3 to 6, whatever it is, there's more about having fun. And now we're getting into that area where they still want to have fun for certain, but we want to now kind of start molding them into some semblance of we're going to do these sorts of things and these sorts of goals. And so we have to have a baseline. And so that may be taking them out on the golf course and let's see how they perform on the golf course and what are their abilities. Are they able to go out and score, let's say, double par on a hole from a forward tee? Well, that's going to set us into a certain goal orientation and objectives.
Right.
But let's say they go to those front tees and they're able to play bogey golf. Different agenda now.
Yeah.
We would also take them over to the short game, and I've got a short game assessment that we do here at work, and that is they do some putts 3, 6, 9, 12, and 15 foot left to right and right to left. They get to putt 2, and we only count what goes in.
Right.
And that totals to a score. And then they have to chip it from 45 feet from the hole and 60 feet from the hole. And then they have to pitch it from about 40 yards from the green. And these all come up with a total. And then we actually have a way to take their score in each segment and put it on a chart. And it gives us a handicap as to where they would be if they were playing golf.
Right.
So they might be a 15 handicap as a putter, but they're a 32 handicap as a chipper.
Right.
And so it gives us a direct relationship of here's how we're going to set out that agenda. And then we set that agenda on how we're going to go about our practice time, how we're going to go about our instruction time, and the objectives, and when we're going to do a reassessment, if you will. And so we get into a little bit more of an agenda versus games and fun, even though within that agenda, at 12 years old, 13 years old, 16 years old, there's still going to be some games. And there's still going to be that fun element to keep them engaged in interest. Because like you said, the last thing we want to do is burn them out.
Yeah. And unfortunately, again, I think there's a time to push a little bit, if they're if they're not doing certain things and they're telling you, they keep saying the same thing, I really want to do this, I want to do that, but they're not putting the effort in that's going to ultimately help them to achieve that, then obviously you have to give them a little bit of push, and encourage them to do certain things to be able to accomplish those goals, and or even tasks. So there obviously comes a point where you're going to start to develop more structure with them as well. When things get a little bit more serious, maybe you're looking at not getting into a lot of tournaments right away, but maybe you want to, sort of dip their toe in the sand a little bit early on. So now you're going to develop some structure in that. But before we get to that, and I'm going to let you digest that for a second, is very early on, you want to establish roles. We know what the player's role is going to be. What is the coach and what is the parent's role is going to be? Because that's important as well, because a lot of times, and as you have alluded to in many Coach's Corner segments over the years, is that sometimes the parents start to become the coach and try to override or overrule, if you will, what it is that you're trying to do. So how do you establish those rules sort of right from the beginning, or what those roles are going to be for each moving forward?
Yeah, I think it's critical that we, as you outlined there, that we do have the role of the player, and we do have the role of the coach, and we do have the role of the parent. And there is some gray area in the parent side,
Sure.
because they're going to be, and let's just target dad. They're going to be dad at times.
Yeah.
And there are going to be times when they're out practicing and playing together that he's going to morph over to be a bit of a coach.
Sure.
And I have to guide that dad on how to be the coach.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I did with my kids, and I try to instill this with my parents, is when I coached my kids, and I had the privilege of coaching them in several sports, and at all situations, I was Coach Endicott when we were at the sport.
Yep.
If we were at the baseball field, I was Coach Endicott. When we were at the football field, I was Coach Endicott. When we were at the golf course, under the context of coach-player relationship, I was Coach Endicott. And I would not respond to,
"Hey, Dad,"
anything but, "Hey, Dad." I ignored.
Right.
And so, in essence, we need to establish a similar criteria to dad in this relationship we're talking about here, where I'm coach to the player and dad is a different person. So dad has to become that in his own way. And it's my job to take the information that's being conveyed to the player and convey that to the dad. Example: player has a struggle with slicing the golf ball to the right as a right-handed golfer.
Mm-hmm.
And dad, what I want you to understand is we have to look at their grip and make sure it looks like this. And I bring the player over and I say, "Johnny, I want you to show your dad your grip." And then dad's going to see that and understand that's what we're going to do. And he's going to understand that when he's struggling with that in practice or on the course, he checks it, and here's the drill he does. And dad, by the way, you don't get to make up new drills.
Right.
And dad, by the way, you don't get to make up new reasons the ball slices. You have to follow what we're doing. And that gives us the ability for me to be the conduit from player to dad and dad back to player. And when you're not here, I'm essentially your voice,
Mm-hmm.
dad, to the player. Now I have to make and establish that same situation with the player. I have
Sure.
to make that sure that that player understands that dad is dad at times and dad is coach at times. And you, player, have to be willing, when we're at the lesson together, and I prefer that to be together alone, you have to tell me if dad's breaking the rules.
Right. Yeah, you got to squeal a little bit.
Yeah, it's tough, but
Right.
you've got to tell me, hey, I was slicing it and he kept telling me I needed to put my right foot back. Okay, now I have to kind of work through that with the two of them together. And notes, writing down things, establishing from these assessments, here's our objectives and here's how you're going to get there. Like you said, at some point we become more structured. We say, okay, your practice time has to be this.
Mm.
Just like if you were in Little League. Little League, coach calls practice.
Yeah.
I'm coach. you have a lesson with me on Thursday afternoons, but on Saturday and Monday and Tuesday, you have practice at this time for this length of time. And here's the activities you're going to do within that. And in there are certain objectives that they have to track and bring back to me to
Sure.
say, I did my 34-foot putts.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm an 18-year-old getting ready to go off to college. I did my 104-foot putts.
Right.
And of course, all those activities are age specific and attention span specific. But yes, we started making an agenda that says, here's our intermediate objectives and goals. And here's our tournament that's out there June 1st that we're targeting for. You have to play this many practice rounds at that golf course. You have to do this much of your planning process, etc. This activity in terms of exercise and weight training and that sort of thing. And in that range that we're still talking about, 7 to 12, or maybe transitioning on up into high school, that workout time frame is not weights. It's body weight activities.
Right.
It's doing push-ups leaning against the kitchen counter. It's doing 5 sit-ups and then taking a break. It's building them about, and again, all those sorts of things are not only strength training, but they're mobility training as well, and their stability training. And going through that high school age group, there's a growth time where their body is growing significantly faster than their nerves are growing.
Right.
And that coordination level deteriorates. And that's a big hurdle for that parent to acknowledge and understand, is their skill level may go like this, and then that puberty hits and its skill level goes like this because they outgrow their own coordination.
Right. And also too, other outside influences, their interests start to change as we all have experienced growing up. The reason why I wanted to touch on the relationship between coach and parents is this. I mean, you laid it out perfectly. But one other point I want to make is you have to treat the parent and coach relationship like a relationship. In other words, you both have to be on the same page, because if they're getting one message from you and then they're now getting another message from the parent, obviously they're going to default on some level to the parent because that's, their guardians and whatnot. And so if your messaging is not in sync, and I think one thing, much like in parenting, I think if dad, let's say, usually is the culprit, if he's not agreeing or not in sync with you, I think it's very important that conversation has taken place elsewhere, and then you come back as a united front. Because I think if you're, instructing and doing something and they're chirping from the sideline saying, no, I want you to do this, I want you to do that. Now the child's getting confusion because they're getting mixed messages. Pardon me. So they're getting a message from you. Now they're suddenly getting a message from dad saying, no, I want you to move that foot back, or I want you to that. So that's where a meeting of the minds. And I think, it's okay for them to challenge you on some things, but I think it has to be much like in parenting. It has to be done in an appropriate way, that you're not putting the child in the middle and having to decide, okay, who do I listen to? So, you and dad have that conversation separately, maybe after that lesson, and saying, we need to come together, come to an agreement or what have you. And so that we can come and back as a united front. Because again, as we know, juniors and kids particularly are going to find a way. They're going to look for the weakest link, and they're going to drive that. Am I not correct on that? Is that not a big issue for coach and parents when they're working with juniors? Is you get that mixed communication message coming through, and then the child just gets more confused as you move forward. So I think you laid it, the rest of it. I just wanted to add that in there because that I know is a problem I'm sure you've seen many, many times over the years. So now that you've defined the roles, you've started to develop structure, how do you, prepare now the student to enter events? It's time now. Let's get them in events. And is there a point when it's too early?
Definitely, there's a point that it's too early. There are organizations out there that start competitive golf at 5, 6 years old.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, those events, even at that age, are very intense.
Mhm.
I run a junior golf tour. We don't start them until age 8. And I can't tell you how many parents I've had come to me and frustrated with the intensity of other organizations because it just beats down the child
Yeah.
looking for this carrot. And I think it has a lot to do with the interest level of the player.
Right.
How do I find that player's desire to go out and check my skills against others?
Mhm.
And I can do that as a coach by having him have a little competition with me. Is he really, or is she really energized to beat coach? If they are really energized to beat coach, well, maybe they ought to test it against their peers.
Sure.
And I let them go against me, even say at 7 or 8 years old. Obviously, if we were hitting the same exact shots, not likely they're going to beat me. But I may take and use their golf club and turn it upside down and hit left-handed. And, some would say, well, you're making it too easy for them to win. No, they still won.
Right.
And they are just as thrilled with winning against coach.
Oh, yeah.
Even though coach is handicapped,
Right.
I beat coach.
Right.
And so now we get an insight into the competitive nature of the player. If I'm doing that and they're just could care less, we're not ready for competition. We're not ready to put them into a tournament because they're just going to get beat up and frustrated. And so now we've seen their competitive edge. Let's go find a tournament setting that they can be competitive in.
Mhm.
In other words, don't put them in the most challenging tournament where the scores are very low and they've never shot a score equivalent to the winning score.
Right.
That would just be demoralizing to them.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can't find a place that they can play and play at their ability, maybe at their best ability to be competitive.
Mhm.
That's perfectly fine. But if their best ability has no chance, what are we doing to the child? We're going to create frustration. So we start targeting places and then we have an assessment. And I love to have the opportunity to be the caddy when they go into those first few, because now I can see exactly what they're doing. I can read that player.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but I can read that player as a player probably better than parent can read the player as a player.
Yeah.
The parent can read the player as their child, but not necessarily as a player. And your interaction with them in a coaching perspective is significantly different. And so you can soften the frustration from a coach perspective versus softening it from a parent perspective. And so we have to find a place that they can compete and have a reasonable chance to have success. Do they have to be able to win? Not necessarily. But if they're in a field of 10, I want them in the top 5. I want them at least the ability. They don't have to score there, but they have to have the ability to score there so that they can go out. And if they don't make it, now we can go back and we can assess it.
Yeah.
And the first thing I ask those players when they complete a competitive round, what went well today?
Yeah.
What went well today? Oh, no, nothing. No, something went well today. Maybe you hit a lot of indifferent shots, but your attitude was spot on and you tried every time you got over the golf ball.
Mhm.
That's a win.
Yeah.
And we don't look at that day and look at what didn't go well. We don't look that they 3-putted 7 times in 9 holes.
Yeah.
We look at they 2-putted 2 times in 9 holes.
Right.
Because the emotion exaggerates the failure,
Right.
exaggerates the indifferent situation, just as the emotion can exaggerate the positive. So we stick on the positive then, and then tomorrow they can come back to coach and say, coach, I think I need to work on my putting because I 3-putted 7 times in 9 holes.
That you really raise a great analogy because, if you look back to Tiger, when he would finish the tournament and he was asked certain questions, he never, they say, well, what do you think about that shot on 15 that you pulled it or whatever the case may be. And he would never focus on that. He would always pivot, and he would say, you know what? I like how I recovered, or I like, my better, he would, and Nicholas did that too. If you ever really listen to Nicholas, they would say, well, your wedge game wasn't that good today. He would always pivot to something positive. My putting was really good today. I'm really happy with that. Or, even though I won the tournament, I know I wasn't playing my A game, and everybody was scratching their head. Tiger used to say it all the time, or, I was playing my A game, but you lost the tournament. Yeah, but I'm happy with what I was doing out there today. And so they're doing exactly what you're suggesting here. And it brings me to this question. You kind of alluded to it a little bit, but I want you just maybe talk a few minutes more about it. So when you have a player that you see noticeably that's struggling in events, and you're sensing that there's a confidence that is being lost, they're losing that confidence, so that they're not as assured as they were, when you were working with them out in the lesson tee. Now all of a sudden they're out in a few events and they're getting beat up pretty bad, let's say, in some cases. So again, you're going to involve the parents here, but is there a point where you say, maybe we need to back off the events right now, let's assess what's been going on and kind of regroup, and then dip our toe in the sand again? Is that something you're going to have a conversation about that should be done? Or the reason why I ask that is because a lot of parents will, well, just put them in more events. They're bound to get something. Where's the line there that you say to them, okay, you know what, I see that you've had some events, you did a lot of good things there, but maybe you're not quite ready for this particular, or what's that conversation going to be like? And do you pull them out or pull them back a little bit, pull the reins back, I guess is what I'm asking, when it comes to events? What do you do in that situation?
Well, if I had my 100% control over
Right.
how many events they play in, and I
Right.
don't, but advising wise, I say, you know what, Jack Nicklaus, when he went out on tour, said he would play 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
So our junior golfers should never play more than 2 weeks in a row.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen them where they play, I run a junior golf tournament or tour, and I've seen them where they play my tour and other tours. They play every single week.
Yeah.
I've had 8-year-olds in my events that play in the morning in my event in Orlando and drive to Lakeland and play in an event that afternoon. That's how some of these parents want their schedule to be. But to your point, if we can establish we're going to play 2 weeks a month, in my perfect world, it'd be, let's call it the first week of the third week. Then I've got a week in between to say, here's what we did well. Here's some things we could improve upon. Let's take some time and improve upon them. Let's get some practice rounds in for that next location, and then let's go play. And then let's assess it again. If I can't get that and we do 2 in a row, fine. Now let's take at least a week, preferably 2, and let's do the same thing. And so I've run up against the wall oftentimes where the parent says, no, we got to play, because I got to get junior golf scoreboard rankings and all that to get to college. Well, guess what? You don't.
Right.
Plain and simple. I'll use my son as an example. On junior golf scoreboard, he was 2,600 on that list. He got a full ride. And he didn't sign his time to go play college golf until June.
Right.
After he graduated his senior year.
Right.
Now, if you want to play at a Florida or a Stanford and that, I get it. But the world doesn't revolve around how many tournaments they play. It revolves around the quality of the tournament that they play. And when I say the quality of the tournament that they play, not necessarily the quality of the field that they play. It doesn't have to be, again, as I said earlier, it doesn't have to be this level that I can't score and compete at. But if I can score and compete at this level, I'm going to have success and coaches will find me. So again, if I could, to your question, do I pull them back? Yes, if at all possible, I pull them back. If they're struggling, we've got to find a way to circle the wagons and get the ingredients that aren't working. And just being under the gun is not going to do it. being under the gun helps in certain situations. But there are times when we have to, I'll go back to it, we got to compete against coach.
Well, and I look at it too, it's like in education, you go in, if you're not prepared for the test, and now you write it and you fail the test, and then you go to do the remake, an hour later, not having a chance to really go and sort of reabsorb the information, then you're probably going to end up with the same results. So, you need to take a break. You need to step back sometimes and reassess and look at things. Okay, why am I having, what areas am I struggling with? What's causing me not to be as competitive as I'd like to be? And you're exactly right. I think it goes to your point. I think what a lot of parents do is they say, okay, I've got to get my kids here. I've got to get them there because we want to get them into XYZ college or program or what have you. And they've got to earn those points. They've got to be, I need to get them noticed. And because it's becomes so competitive now in junior golf, and there's a million different tours and opportunities out there, that they want to play as many as possible. Well, the poor kids, basically it's like dragging him behind the bumper of a car. He's just bouncing off the road, and he doesn't know where he or she's going. And the parents, we're going to be late. We got to go there. And the poor kid shows up disheveled and whatnot. So, I think it's important. That's why I wanted you to sort of define the roles earlier, because again, God love them. I know parents mean well, but sometimes they don't really have the child's interests, their best interests at heart. And they're injecting too much of what they envision should happen. And a lot of times, and I know this for a fact, I've spoken to many other coaches and like yourself, who have had conversations with the kids who've gone to some of the best, short game schools, you name it, you know what I'm talking about, in the country, and ended up falling to the wayside because they were just under so much pressure that they just said, I can't do this. I just can't. It's just a pressure cooker. And they didn't have a chance to really, because they were dragged around so much, really take a step back and say, okay, this is too much. I need to look at this a little bit differently. And they just push. And unfortunately, I hate to say it, but there's even some schools out there that have gotten too aggressive in that area because it's competitive. And, I understand they're trying to attract the top players and that, but let the kids be kids too. So you mentioned, I'm going to give you a sense because we're getting ready to wrap up here. You mentioned about you're involved with the tour. You have been for a junior tour. Tell us a little bit about that. How can people learn more about that? And then let the folks know how they can get in touch with you if they're interested in communicating.
Yeah, the junior tour is the top 50 junior tour. We host events in Orlando once a month. All through the summer, we do it in Michigan, primarily in the Detroit area, but go on up in the peninsula to Treetops for our big event, 4th of July weekend. And we also have a new satellite program in Ohio. And the beauty of the program there is if you win on our tour in your age group, you are exempt into the next event free of charge.
Oh, wow.
And the other part to it that I think is wonderful is it's called the Top 50 Scholarship Tour. And so kids can earn a scholarship to college by playing our tour, starting at age 11 until they graduate from high school. Depending on where they finish in the events, they earn points. When they graduate high school and they believe they're worthy of a scholarship, they fill out an application and write an essay, and that's worth points. Part of that application has information about their community service hours. Those are worth points. And so we add all those points together, and we take and multiply that by their GPA that they graduate high school with. And whatever that math works out to be, we stroke a check to the university that they go to.
Wow.
So if they earn 1,000 points and they have a 3.0 GPA, they're going to get $3,000.
Wow, that's great.
It's a really cool program that we've been able to put together as part of the events. And the age groups, we have 8 to 10-year-olds that play 9 holes 2 days a week, different than most of that age that only play 1 day. We also go 11 to 14 boys, 11 to 14 girls, and 15 to 18 boys and 15 to 18 girls. And they're very competitive. Depending on the week, you could win, depending on the golf course and the field, In the 15 to 18-year-old boys, you could win an event scoring 150 for 2 days. But I've had it where they had to shoot 136 for 2 days as well.
Right. Right.
And there have been many players come through our program that have gone on to play Division I college golf. In fact, I had one who said, the reason I have the opportunity to go to this Division I school was the fact that I won on your tour, coach.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So it's a great place to start into competitive golf. Like I was saying, let's find a place that they can compete in. They can compete in this.
How can they learn about it? Where can they go to get more information? If they're interested, parents, particularly tuning into the podcast, we've got some youngins that fit into that category. Where can they go to get more information or become a participant in the tour?
All of our information, schedule, how to become a member of the tour, etc., is on top50juniortour.com. So top50jrtour.com.
Perfect.
So if you Google that, it'll populate there. And once you're a member of one area, if you're a member in Orlando, you're a member in Michigan. And we've had people go from Michigan down to Orlando to play events and vice versa.
Perfect. And how can they reach you? What's the best way to contact you if they want to get in touch, whether it's for the tour or whether it's just to maybe delve into some of your coaching talents? How can they reach out to you, Jim?
I can be reached at jim@endicottgolf.com. If you got my name up there on the screen, just spell it out there, Jim at last name endicottgolf.com.
Perfect. And as I mentioned in the beginning, Jim is a top 25 instructor and also a contributor to Golf Tips Magazine, and he's going to be putting some stuff together, and we're going to be getting it up on our website, golftipsmag.com, real soon, so you want to keep checking back for that. Jim, I want to thank you as always. It's a pleasure. I hope the topic was right up your wheelhouse. I know that you enjoy obviously all aspects of golf, as I mentioned in the beginning, but I know that you enjoy specifically trying to help some of these juniors up and coming and realize their potentials as they move forward. But keep doing the great work. Always love having you on the show, and I look forward to next time you coming on the Coach's Corner panels.
Improve your putting with the Alignment Ball Marker, a revolutionary new in-game putting alignment tool and ball marker. Its patented design allows you to read your putt and adjust your alignment at the same time by using your putter, which improves your accuracy and makes the process of putting faster. 100% legal according to the USGA, by their definition, permitted under the rules of golf. Winner of Best New Product at the PGA Show and only $9.99 on Amazon. And it's also completely customizable for any golf event or as a promotional giveaway. Order at alignmentballmark.com.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this week's broadcast of Golf Talk Live. We'd like to thank this week's Coach's Corner panel, and a special thank you to tonight's guest. Remember to join Ted every Thursday from 6 to 8 p.m. Central on Golf Talk Live. And be sure to follow Ted on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you're interested in being a guest on Golf Talk Live, send Ted an email at ted.golftalklive@gmail.com. This has been a production of the iGolf Sports Network.